We'll have opportunity also afterwards for Q&A, for a few moments, for a few questions. All right. Are we all right outside? Okay. He is an icon of history, and he is history. He is a giant who walked and marched among giants and was a giant himself. He was bloodied but walked on. He was beaten but marched on. He was knocked down but rose up with glorious defiance. He is a hero but hides in the humility of the shadows. His deeds made a difference in the lives of millions, and he transformed a society, a culture, and a nation. His is a life of triumph, testimony of how the righteous prevail and the evildoers perish. Often called one of the most courageous persons the civil rights movement ever produced, John Lewis has dedicated his life to promoting civil rights and promoting civil liberties for all. His dedication to the highest ethical standards and highest moral principles has earned him praise and admiration from colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Born the son of sharecroppers in the heart of the South, he grew up on his family's farm and attended a segregated school. As a young boy, he was inspired by the Montgomery bus boycott and by the words of the Reverend Martin Luther King. These moments were pivotal in Congressman John Lewis's decision to join the civil rights movement. Ever since, he has been in the forefront of the human rights struggle here in America. As a college student, John Lewis organized sit-ins at lunch counters in Nashville. He participated in freedom rides challenging interstate bus travel discrimination in the South. He risked his life, often in the pursuit of justice, often beaten severely by angry mobs, often arrested by the police. While still a young man, John Lewis became a significant national leader. In 1963, was considered to be one of the big six leaders of the civil rights movement. John Lewis was there at every pivotal moment in the history of the civil rights movement, risking it all, sacrificing it all, defying it all. But in the face of water hoses and clubs and snarling dogs and death threats and flowing blood and broken bones, he remained an advocate of nonviolence. The good Lord watched over John Lewis during those ugly and proud years, as he did the prophets of old. His journey has brought him to the Congress of the United States as the proud, devoted representative of the 5th Congressional District that he has served faithfully since 1986. John Lewis lives here in Georgia. He is married to Lillian Miles, who I understand is in the hospital, and we wish her a speedy, speedy recovery. And he is the proud father of John Miles. One thing I noticed is that the congressman and I share a name, Congressman Lewis and Shalom Lewis. And we talked as we were walking down, and we found out that we thought maybe we were mishpacha, we were family, and spiritually, of course, we all are. But I found out that I'm a Litvak, and he's a Galicianer. It is my pleasure, it is our pleasure, and it is our honor as I present to this marvelous body, Congressman John Lewis.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Rabbi Lewis. My friend, my brother, for those kind words of introduction. Let me just take a moment to welcome each and every one of you, not from Atlanta, not from Georgia, to Atlanta and to Georgia. You look so good. You've been working hard. Thank you for coming here. You look handsome, beautiful, wonderful. Now you heard Rabbi Lewis tell you that I didn't grow up in a big city like Boston or New York or Los Angeles. I didn't grow up in a big city like Savannah or New Orleans or Buffalo. I grew up in rural Alabama, that's what he told you. 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4. How many of you remember when you was 4? That's very good. What happened to the rest of us? In 1944, when I was only 4 years old, and I remember so well, my father had saved $300. And with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. My family still owns this land today in southeast Alabama. On this farm, we raise a lot of cotton and corn, peanuts, cows, and chickens. On the farm, I know you don't know anything about raising chicken. I know you're very smart. You're gifted, talented. Some of you may know something about Popeyes, churches. Oh, another one would be Chick-fil-A here in Georgia and some parts of the country. But you don't know anything about raising chickens, do you? Any of you know anything about raising chickens? Oh, a few of you? Oh, okay, that's okay then. But let's have a little fun here. On this farm, it was my responsibility to care for the chickens. And I fell in love with raising chickens like no one else could raise chickens. I became very good at it. As a little boy, I would take the fresh eggs and mark them with a pencil, place them under this setting hen, and wait for 3 long weeks for the little chicks to hatch. Some of you may be saying, now John Lewis, why do you mark those fresh eggs with a pencil before you place them under the setting hen? Well, from time to time, another hen would get on that same nest. And there would be some more eggs. And you have to be able to tell the fresh eggs from the eggs that were already under the setting hen. Do you follow me? You don't follow me, it's okay. When these little chicks would hatch, I would fool these setting hens. I would cheat on these setting hens. I would take these little chicks and give them to another hen. Put them in a box with a lantern, raise them on their own. Get some more fresh eggs, mark it with a pencil, place them under their setting hen, encourage the setting hen to stay on the nest for another 3 weeks. I was never quite able to save $18.98 to order the most inexpensive incubator or hatcher from the Susan Roebuck store. Any of you in here old enough to remember the Susan Roebuck catalog? Really, you really do? That big book, thick, heavy. Some people call it the ordering book. Other people call it the wish book. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. So I just kept on wishing. But Rabbi, as a young boy, 8 or 9 years old, I wanted to be a minister. I wanted to preach the gospel. So from time to time, with the help of my brothers and sisters and my first cousins, we would gather all of our chickens together in the chicken yard, like you gather here in this room. And the chickens, along with my brothers and sisters and cousins, my cousin would line the outside of the chicken yard, but they helped make up the audience, the congregation. And I would start speaking or preaching. And when I look back on it, some of those chickens would bow their heads. Some of those chickens would shake their heads. They never quite said amen. But I'm convinced that some of those chickens that I preached to in the 40s and the 50s tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listen to me today in the Congress. As a matter of fact, some of those chickens was just a little more productive. At least they produce eggs. Well, that's enough of that story. Don't tell any of my colleagues in the Congress I said that, but I think that's the truth. Growing up there, outside of Troy, we would visit the little town of Troy, visit Montgomery, visit Birmingham, visit Tuskegee. I saw those signs that said white men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. As a young child, I tasted the bitter fruits of segregation and racial discrimination. On a Saturday afternoon, when we would go downtown to the theater, all of us little black children had to go upstairs to the balcony. And all of the little white children went downstairs to the first. 1956, at the age of 16, with some of my brothers and sisters and cousins, we went down to the public library in the little town of Troy, Alabama, trying to check out some books, trying to get library cards. And we were told by the librarian that the library was for whites only and not for coloreds. I never went back to the Pike County Public Library until July 5th, 1998, not the same building, for book signing on my book, Walking with the Wind. And hundreds of black citizens showed up and they gave me a library card. When I finished high school in May of 1957, at the age of 17, I applied to go to Troy State College. It is now known as Troy University. Submitted my application, my high school transcript, never heard a word from the college. So I wrote a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't tell my mother, my father, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents. I didn't tell any of my teachers, any of my brothers or sisters. I just wrote a letter to Dr. King. He wrote me back and sent me a round-trip Greyhound bus ticket and invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. In the meantime, I had been accepted at a little college in Nashville, Tennessee, and I would never forget it as long as I live. September 1957. An uncle of mine gave me a $100 bill, more money than I ever had. Gave me one of these upright Foot Locker, one of these big trunks that swing over, had the drawers and the drapers. You can hang your clothes up and put something in drawers. I put everything that I own in that Foot Locker, except those chickens, and took a Greyhound bus to Nashville, Tennessee. And it was in Nashville that I started studying the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. Started studying the great religions of the world. Started studying what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa, what he accomplished in India. Started studying the way of civil disobedience, the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence and passive resistance. And it was there that I got involved in the modern day civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. got back in church with me and suggested when I was home for spring break to come and see him. When I was back, my father drove me to the Greyhound bus station. I boarded a bus and traveled the 50 miles from Parks for Dr. King and the Montgomery movement. Met me at the Greyhound bus station and drove me to the First Baptist Church in downtown Montgomery, pastored by the late Reverend Ralph Abernathy, a colleague of Dr. King, and ushered me into the office of the church. I saw Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend Ralph Abernathy standing behind a desk. And Dr. King spoke up and said, "Well, you the boy from Troy? Well, you John Lewis?" And I said, "Dr. King, I am John Robert Lewis." I gave him a whole name. It was then that I was really turned on. I was inspired to get in the way. I was inspired to get in trouble. Good trouble, necessary trouble. Sometime in America during these past few weeks and months and years, I feel like those of us in the religious community and those of us in the Congress have been afraid to get in trouble, afraid to make some noise, to stand up, to speak up and speak out. When I was growing up and would visit the little town of Troy, visit Montgomery, visit Tuskegee, visit Birmingham, I tried to avoid saying Jew because I didn't like the way it came out when I heard some of the racists in the South said. So I tried to find a way to say to Jewish people, I grew up listening to Negro spiritual. One of my favorite was song that we were singing and heard it at Fisk University. The Jubilee singer would sing it, go down Moses, where down in Egypt land, and tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. We saw our struggle in the civil rights movement similar to the struggle of the children of Israel. So that's why it was not strange, it was not out of the ordinary for hundreds and thousands of young Jewish students, for rabbis, everyday people, professors, and others to identify with the sit-ins in 1960, the Freedom Rise in 1961, 51 years ago. Many of us were beaten together, jailed together. And we must never, ever forget that in June of 1961, 3 young men that I knew, that I met, Andy Goodman, Mickey Schreiner from New York, Jewish, James Shaney, African American from Mississippi, on the summer night of June 21st, 1964, these 3 young men, riding in a car, went out to investigate the burning of an African American church. They were detained by the sheriff, later taken to jail, taken out of jail, turned over to the Klan, where they were beaten, shot, and killed. 6 weeks later, their bodies were discovered buried under a mound of dirt. That was a sad and dark hour for the movement, but we didn't give up. We didn't become bitter. We didn't become hostile. We kept the faith. These 3 young men didn't die in Eastern Europe. They didn't die in the Middle East. They didn't die in Africa. They didn't die in Vietnam. They didn't die in Central or South America. They died right here in America, trying to make a way for all of our citizens, for all our people to become participants in the democratic process. As members of the Jewish community, as members of the African American community, as Americans and as people of the world, we must never ever forget that. There's a whole group of us, African Americans, Jewish members, non-Jewish members, in the Congress are trying to get the Postal Service to issue a stamp in honor of these 3 young men. They're the founding fathers of the new America. They helped make our country and make our world a better place. Just think, in the state of Mississippi, in 1964, that state had a black voting age population of more than 450,000, and only about 16,000 blacks were registered to vote. Just think, one county between Selma and Montgomery, the county was more than 80% African American. There was not a single registered African American voter in the county. People had to pass a so-called literacy test, interpret certain section of the state constitution, pay a poll tax. On one occasion, a man was asked to count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap. Another occasion, a man was asked to count the number of jelly beans in a jar. People stood in unmovable lines. College professors, lawyers and doctors, housewives and farmers, school teachers flunked or failed the so-called literacy test. We had to change that. We have come a distance, but we still have a great distance to go in America and around this world before we create a world community at peace with itself. Create what Dr. King would call the beloved community. create a truly multiracial democratic society. We have to do it, and we must do it. I would never forget the March on Washington, August 1963, when the 10 leaders met and spoke. There was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Jerome Prince of the American Jewish Congress who helped organize the march. He had been born in Berlin, came to America, lived in New Jersey, and became a force for civil rights and for social justice. I will never forget when we left Selma, Alabama on the third attempt, the march across that bridge where some of us have been beaten, bloody, trampled by horses. Rabbi Herschel walked with us. In my congressional office in Washington, there is a picture with Rabbi Herschel, Ralph Bunche, Martin Luther King Jr., a nun from St. Louis, Reverend Abernathy, and myself, heading the line. So I come here more than anything else, Rabbi Lewis, to thank members of the Rabbinical Assembly for never ever giving up, for never ever giving in, never ever getting lost in a sea of despair, for keeping the faith. We suffered, we bled together, we died together. We must continue to do what we must to create a society at peace with itself. Sometimes I feel like saying, what is it? Is it something in the water that we drink? What is it? Is it something in the food that we eat? What is it? Is it something in the air that we breathe? Why can we just lay down the burden of division, the burden of separation, the burden of hate? Why? When, you know, my community, we grew up singing those songs. We read the scripture. And somehow we truly believe that we understand. I've been to Israel 5 times, 5 on 5 different occasions. I've been to Germany, visit the memorials, Holocaust Museum in Washington, the one outside of the city of Chicago, Los Angeles. And I still don't understand, why is that? What happened? What was hate and poison such a force? What happened must never, ever happen again. And that's why we must continue to stand up and speak truth to power. That's why we must continue to find a way to get in the way and make some noise. I made some noise because I was inspired. Some of my Jewish brothers and sisters, we went to jail during the sit-ins, during the freedom rides, during our effort in Selma and Mississippi and other parts of the South. I got arrested 40 times. 40 times, but simply because I'm a member of Congress doesn't mean that I won't get arrested again for what is right and what is fair and what is just. I marched with some of my Jewish brothers down to the South African embassy, down to the Sudanese embassy, Since being in Congress the past few years, I got arrested with some of my brothers and sisters 4 times. We have to make some noise. We're too quiet. We have to find a way to get in the way. Now I just want to tell you a story or two. When I was growing up outside of Troy, Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, I had an aunt by the name of Seneva. And my Aunt Seneva lived at what we call a shotgun house. Now, those of you who have lived in New York, or in Detroit, or Chicago, or in Tel Aviv, or Jerusalem, in Boston, or some other places, Paris, or London, other places around the world, you've never seen a shotgun house. My Aunt Seneva lived in a shotgun house. I know what I'm talking about because I was born in a shotgun house. My Aunt Seneva didn't have a green manicured lawn. Had a simple, plain dirt yard. Sometime at night, you can look up through the holes in the ceiling, through the holes in the tin roof, and count the stars. Whenever it rained, she would get a pail, a bucket, or a tub and catch the rainwater. From time to time, she would walk out into the woods and cut branches from a dogwood tree and tie these branches together and make a broom, and she would call that broom the breast broom. And she would sweep this dirt yard very clean. She wanted it to look very good during the weekend, especially on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. For those of you who may not know what a shotgun house is, in the non-violent sense, it's an old house, one way in, one way out, where you can bounce a basketball through the front door, and it will go straight out the back door. But one Saturday afternoon, a group of my brothers and sisters, and a few of my first cousins, about 12 or 15 of us young children, were out playing in my Aunt Seneva's dirt yard. And an unbelievable storm came up. The wind started blowing, the thunder started rolling, the lightning started flashing, and the rain started beating on the tin roof of this old shotgun house. My aunt became terrified. She started crying. She thought this whole house was going to blow away. She got all of us little children together and told us to hold hands. The wind continued to blow. The thunder continued to roll. The lightning continued to flash. And the rain continued to beat on the tin roof of this old shotgun house. And we cried and we cried. And from one corner of this old house appeared to be lifting from its foundation. She had us to walk to that corner to try to hold the house down with our little bodies. When the other corner appeared to be lifted, had us to walk to that side to try to hold the house down with our little bodies. We were little children walking with the wind, but we never ever left the house. We all live in the same house. It doesn't matter whether we're Christian or Jewish, Muslim. It doesn't matter whether we're black or white, Latino or Asian American or Native American. We're one people, we're one family, we're one house. We must save this little planet. We must save this little piece of real estate, not just for ourselves, but for generation yet unborn. That is our calling. That is our mission. Stand up for what is right. Stand up for what is fair. Stand up for what is just. Rabbis, your leaders, lead. Get out front. Here in America and around the world, we must rebuild that coalition of conscience. In America, but around our planet. That is our calling. That is our mission. That is our mandate. We must not be happy, pleased, or satisfied until we hear the words of the prophet Amos. Let justice roll down. In another age, in another day, in our own country. In other places, people stood up. Now it is our time to stand up and stand up again. Thank you very much. Thank you.
People who have the right to vote, but that the establishment is not letting them do that. And I'm wondering if you can give us some, we'll say in Hebrew, Eitzah Tovah, good advice about what we should do when we confront things like this. Right now there's been rabbinic silence.
Let me just thank the two of you. Thank you for coming to Selma. So many members of the Jewish community came to Selma, came to Mississippi, came to South Georgia. I want to thank you. I'm going to respond to your question. My roommate in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee for several years, for about 4 years, was a young Jewish photographer. Some of you may recognize his name, by the name of Danny Lyon. Anyone recognize his name? Recognize his name? He's one of the great photographers today. Grew up in New York City, came south, had just recently graduated from the University of Chicago with a camera. He said, I'd like to help. And someone said, you're a good photographer, just record what is happening. And he used his camera to tell the story of what was going on in Selma, in Mississippi, in South Georgia, and around the South. I make the point that without the witness on the part of so many members of the Jewish community, the civil rights movement would have been like a bird without wings. So I come here to say thank you also for being there. On the whole question of voter ID, it's a step backward. It is a step backward. To say someone must show an ID, especially in parts of America where you have people living 80 and 90 years old and have birth certificate. They never had a driving license. And in some places, it's a form of a poll tax because you have to pay for it. We should make it as easy and as simple and as convenient for everybody to be able to participate, to vote, and encourage more people to participate in the democratic process. In the meantime, I think we have to try to find a way to get people to get absentee ballots so they won't have to show an ID. They can fill out their absentee ballots at home, mail it back, or go out and provide IDs for people. Because there's nothing, not one thing should turn someone away from the polling place on election day. We all must participate. The vote is the most powerful, non-violent tool we have in a democratic society, and we have to use it. We have to use it.
More? Okay, quick. We have 2 jacks. That is the end, okay?
Very quick.
Congressman Lewis.
It was members in 1963, 19 of us of the Rabbinical Assembly who went down to Birmingham to march with Dr. King. And I think this being a meeting of the Rabbinical Assembly, we can all take some pride in what we did at a time when it was very dangerous to do.
Well, I salute each and every one of you. I salute the Rabbinical Assembly for standing up, for having the courage. You're right, it was very dangerous to go to Birmingham for people that were located in places like Selma and parts of Mississippi. Here in Atlanta is supposed to be very, very progressive. But right here in this city, the temple was bombed. The temple was bombed. There were people saying that there was a conspiracy on the part of members of the Jewish community and the African American community or the NACP. And listen, look, people were standing up what they believed that was right, what they felt in their soul, in their hearts, in their guts. So all of you should be very proud of the contribution that people who came along even before many of us made to organizations like the NACP and CORE and Dr. King's group, SCLC and SNCC. Thank you.
Congressman, everywhere we turn, there's work to be done. Can you help us by identifying perhaps what you consider to be the 2 or 3 most important issues for us as a community to stand up and lead?
Well, I think it's very important that we see that all of our children, all of our young people receive the best possible education. No, I happen to believe that the whole question of health care, I think is a right. Is a right, really. And it shouldn't be, the quality of your health care shouldn't be based on the size of your wallet, a bank account, or the zip code you live in. You live in America. You live on this little planet. We should just make it affordable, make it accessible to everybody. And I think people have a right to know what is in the food we eat, what is in the air we breathe, what is in the water that we drink. And we should try to do our part, not just here in America, but around the world, to save this little planet. Save it. It's not ours to waste and to hoard, but leave it a little cleaner, a little more peaceful, and a little greener. And we got to do everything possible to make this world a world free of violence and terrorism. We got to do that.
On behalf of the Rabbinical Assembly, we of course have been honored by your presence and inspired by your words. We have a gift that we wish to give you. This is a text that has been worked on for over a decade. It is entitled The Observant Life, and we recognize as people of the Bible and as people of faith, as do you, that the observant life is not just rituals and doing things. It is also a life that is rooted in morals, in ethics, and in all that you stand for. So I am honored to give you this text from all of your friends here in the Rabbinical Assembly, presented to the Honorable John Lewis by the Rabbinical Assembly. V'darshu et shalom ha'ir, seek the welfare of the city where you dwell. God bless you and thank you. Escort you out. What's that?